Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be pairing the Grandmother with this mini Eurorack Modular here just to give you an idea of how you can combine the two together. Because as you know, the Grandmother is semi-modular, it's got tons of different patch points, so it's sort of begging to be patched into other systems. Alright, so let me give you a quick tour of the modular here just so you know what's going on. So this is a tiny little 84 HP 3U system. We have the 555 by Roland here, which gives us noise, ring mod, LFO, and a bunch of different utilities. We have the 510 here, which is a combo oscillator filter VCA. We have a fold processor here to add some distortion and manipulate our waveforms. We have the Forbidden Planet, which is a new filter by Tiptop based on the Steiner Parker filter, and then we have the Z8000, which is a 16-channel multi-directional CV sequencer, which we can use to modulate different parameters. So I've got the super basic patch here. I can bring up the noise on the Grandmother here, which is white noise. But let's say I wanted pink noise. What I can do here is grab the pink noise and feed it into the noise input of the mixer. So I'm effectively replacing Grandmother's noise with the Roland pink noise here. So now we can hear, we get that chunkier, fuller pink noise. And then the same signal path applies here with the Grandmother. So let's say you wanted to add a third oscillator or even replace one of Grandmother's oscillators. Maybe you want to combine a Moog oscillator with a Roland oscillator or any other. If you have a digital wavetable oscillator, that would be cool too, because then you can combine the sort of pure analog tones with the harsh digital stuff and get a nice blend. But for now, I'm just going to demonstrate the oscillator I have here. You want to be able to use the same keyboard here to control the pitch of the external oscillator. So the way to do that is if you have this keyboard CV output here, and you're going to patch that into your volt per octave input of whatever oscillator you have. Next, you just need to grab the audio output of your oscillator. So I'm going to grab the sawtooth from here, and then you can feed it into the mixer and you can replace either the noise oscillator 2 or oscillator 1. I'm going to put it into the noise here, and effectively now we have 3 oscillators. So this is Grandmother's oscillator 1, Grandmother's oscillator 2, and then we have the Roland oscillator instead of our noise here. So now we can create this hybrid Franken synth with 3 oscillators, and you can change different octaves for each one. So here I have 8 foot, 2 foot, and 16 foot. So we get this. Of course, everything's still going through the Grandmother filter here. Now we can create these like bassy, plucky sounds. And of course, the sequencer still works because the sequencer will output CV here as well. The other cool thing we can do is completely replace the Moog filter. So if you wanted to kind of swap things out and maybe put a Roland filter or a different flavor like a Prophet filter or a Steiner Parker filter, effectively Eurorack, you get every flavor of filter known to man basically. So if you wanted to replace the filter, you just have to kind of bypass it by jumping over the filter. So the way you do that is you grab the output of the mixer and then you go straight into the VCA input. So at this point the filter is completely disengaged. So what's cool now is that instead of completely bypassing everything, we can first go through the Roland filter here. So I can patch in one of the inputs here, and then I can grab the raw output of the filter here and feed it into my VCA. So instead of going mixer, filter, VCA, we're going mixer, filter, VCA. Simple enough. And now basically we have the Roland filter instead of the Moog. So if you remember, the Grandmother is hardwired so that the envelope generator controls the cutoff frequency of the filter. But we can do that same effect here because the filter cutoff has a jack here and the envelope has an output. So we can just grab the output from the envelope and feed it into the filter here, effectively giving us the same effect. And keep in mind, you can go in the other direction as well. So if you have a Eurorack system that is your primary sound source, you can of course use modules from the Grandmother as part of your Eurorack as well. So for example, you can patch an oscillator through the Moog filter and then out of the Moog filter back into your Eurorack, effectively giving you a standalone filter that you can use in your system. So up here, I have a module called a fold processor by Tiptop Audio, which effectively folds the waveform, giving you additional harmonics. So I'm going to grab a simple waveform with the minimal harmonics that we have available here, which is the triangle. And I'm going to grab the raw triangle output from here, feed it through the fold processor. And then out of my fold processor, I'm going to go into the mixer into channel 1 or oscillator 1 in this case. So effectively, instead of having oscillator 1 going straight into the mixer, it's going through the fold processor, being folded, and then coming back into the mixer. So if I bring that up now, so now I can fold that wave, which gives you these really gnarly, interesting sounds, which color the oscillator a bit more. And of course, you can still run it through the filter here. And what's cool is that we can use the envelope here to control the fold. So instead of me moving this knob with my hand, we can just have the shape control it here when I press a key. So let's create a more interesting shape here. All right, next I'm going to demonstrate a very similar thing as I did with the filter here, except this time we're going to use a Steiner Parker flavored filter, which sounds pretty different than the Grandmother here. So similar deal, we just grab the output of our mixer, run it through one of the 3 modes here. Let's start off with low pass, and then we just grab the output of our filter into our VCA, effectively bypassing this guy here. So as you can see, it gives you a completely different flavor than what the Moog filter did. And of course, we can grab it through the bandpass instead. Sounds super crazy and lovely because it's on the verge of self-oscillating, but it's hesitating, so it's like fighting with a demon or something. So that crackle is actually kind of cool. What other thing we can do is grab this LFO here, attenuate it, and then use that to control the unattenuated input here. So we're going to have the LFO in a combination with the envelope controlling the cutoff frequency. That sounds absolutely insane. All right, let's try the high pass filter. right, the last module here is the Z8000 by Tiptop, which is a CV sequencer. What that means is effectively it just fires different voltages depending on which knob is selected here. And then you feed it some kind of clock, and that clock just goes, okay, knob 1, knob 2, knob 3, knob 4, and then you have a bunch of different configurations. So let's patch that in. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab the gate output of the sequencer and feed that into the clock input. Let's start off with a simple 4-step here. So there's a dedicated clock output in the back of the grandmother, but I found when I patch that into this module, it tends to trigger on both the rising and falling edge. I'm not sure if that's a fault of the grandmother or just this module may be looking for a specific gate length or something like that. So effectively, if I patch it in the back for every clock step here, this advances 2 steps, which is not what I want. But when I patch the gate out here, then it works properly. All right, so how could you use something like this? Effectively, anything that has a CV input, you can feed this into. All right, so if I hit play on my ARP now, you're gonna see the LEDs here start flashing in rhythm. So what I can do now is patch this here, which corresponds to these 4 knobs here, to the cutoff frequency input here. So now these knobs here control the value of this knob at every step. And of course we can feed this into a longer sequence here by having all 16 channels. And if you want, you can make it more subtle by running it through the attenuator first. That way you can control the amount that it controls the cutoff frequency here. And of course you can run this through the mult here so that we can patch it to other destinations. So now I can patch this into the pitch input if I wanted to. Or the pulse modulation input. Or the pitch in of oscillator 2. Set it to sync. So in this case, we only have one LFO, but I have an LFO here on this 555 module. So there's a couple of ways you can utilize this. One is if you wanted to control different parameters at different rates. Let's say I wanted to have vibrato here with my pitch modulation. Let's say I wanted to have a really slow pulse width modulation. I couldn't do that here because I'm already using this quick LFO. So one thing we can do is, for example, I grab the sine wave LFO here and I have a slow running LFO. I'll run that through the attenuator first so I can have a little bit control, and then run that to the pulse width input here. Another cool trick you could do with 2 LFOs is have one LFO control the speed of the other LFO, and you get these weird variations in rhythm. So I've just set up the grandmother LFO to control the cutoff frequency here. Super exaggerated just so we can hear the effect. So now I can grab this Roland LFO, feed it through my attenuator so I can control it a little more. And then we're going to grab that signal and feed it through the rate input of this LFO here. So now you can hear as this LFO rises, it increases the speed of this one. So you get these interesting rhythms. Of course, you can grab different waveforms. And you can create these interesting variations in rhythm. The other thing we can play around with is adding a ring modulator, which is a very classic effect that you find in a lot of kind of vintage synths. The grandmother doesn't have one, but we have a ring mod here with the 555. So I'm going to patch the raw output of one of my oscillators into the first input. And I'm going to grab the raw output of the second one into the second one. And then grab the output of the ring mod and feed that into the mixer. And you can patch one of the waveforms from the LFO here.